Right. Welcome, everyone. This is week 4, and we'll be going over business model and how to make money for this section. So, to get started, first, this is agenda. So we're starting with logistics, and then we have our amazing speaker presentation, and followed by Q&A, so you can ask the speakers questions. And for logistics, again, camera on, mute on. Feel free to send any questions in the chat or use the raise hand function by Zoom. And again, no accommodation for missing assignments. Just a friendly reminder that business model assignment and project assignment 4 is due this Sunday. If you have any questions, feel free to email decode@gmail.com. So let's begin. What is a business model? It is essentially a choice that a company or business chooses to make, figuring out the question of how your business can make money, how you deliver values to your customers at an appropriate cost. Business models can also be really helpful tools to help entrepreneurs navigate, experiment, test, and model different ways that they could structure their costs and revenue streams. So to streamline their services or products. And by doing so, they can figure out the most efficient way to grow their sales and also operate productively. So I've provided a really helpful spreadsheet here where, really to help break things down and also help you all visualize a way of formulating a business model. These are just some guiding questions that a good business model seeks to answer. And a few things to note is that you should be clear about everything it takes to make something. So what you're designing, what are some raw materials, some manufacturing processes, and the labor, and so on. Second of all, you should take into consideration like everything it takes to sell that something. So it's more of focusing on the operation side of things where you include marketing strategies, distribution channels, delivering a service, and also how long does it take to process the sale. And last but not least, like how and what the customer pays. So your pricing strategies, how to remain competitive in the market, and how are you going to pay in your timing and so on. So there can be so many variations to business model, but to simplify things, we can classify them into 2 categories. So one, B2B, stands for business to business. And these are companies that support enterprises that offer things other businesses need to operate and grow. So for example, we can think of Apple. When Apple outsources different parts from other companies or manufacturers, they are essentially engaging in a B2B business model. And on the other hand, we also have B2C model, which stands for business to consumers. It represents the process of like selling products and services directly between a business and consumers. And this model has definitely become more common nowadays due to acceleration of technology in our daily lives. For example, we can use retail sites to buy certain products, and it bridges the gap between the businesses and the consumers. The one thing to note here is also that actually most companies are moving away from just solely being a B2B or B2C. They're moving toward more of a mixed model. So it could be something like Amazon, where businesses use this platform to feature their products, and consumers also use this platform to get all the different kind of things they want. So we'll be going over some like common business model. One is freemium. It essentially represents freemium, premium, where like Spotify, Dropbox, LinkedIn, they're like internet companies that want to have like a small customer acquisition cost, but also want a high lifetime value. So this means that the businesses does not necessarily want to put generating revenue as a top priority, but want to prioritize their growth model. And it helps users to utilize basic features such as like basically Spotify, you can listen to music. Dropbox, it gives you a certain amount of storage space, and LinkedIn, you can view other people's profile. But to access the upgrade version of things, you will have to pay, and that's how these companies generate their revenue. And another example is also shared value transaction. So it is the idea that by addressing society's needs and challenges, companies can create economic value in a way that also benefits the society. So in this case, we're looking at Google Maps. It used to be that we as users pay directly for GPS services to be installed on our cars, but now we someone else pay for ads, and Google basically collect all these payments, and they use part of this payment to provide Google Maps services for free, and how we as users benefit from it. Another interesting model is YouTube. So YouTube tried to build a community or a platform with engaging consumers. So they allow users to enjoy a lot of free content while generating revenues. And it is a growth model that really uses traffic to help other small businesses to achieve their goals or to help them sell their products. And I think one thing really interesting about YouTube is that it's almost like an ecosystem where they built that you as consumers of YouTube start by being consumers, but you eventually end up being employees of YouTuber when you start making YouTube videos on your own. Yeah, and marketplace business model is like Airbnb and eBay, which allow sellers to list items for sale and provide customers with easy tools to connect with sellers. And low touch business model means companies lower their prices by providing fewer services. So for Costco, it will be selling their items at a really cheap price. For Southwest, it's a budget airline. And in both of these cases, the services are all built to lower the price as much as possible. And they don't necessarily offer additional services for customers because consumers know that by going to these places, they're trying to get the low price, which is their competitive advantage. And last but not least, something that's more relevant to us right now, COVID-19, with the pandemic, it really accelerated the growth of fintech business model, such as like using a lot of mobile money, which is something that we often hear about, and Apple Pay and Venmo is like two examples of it. And although Venmo does not charge individual users for sending or receiving payments, it actually generates income through its own like Venmo Touch services, and that charges a 2.9% fee to businesses. And this is how we as customers, we can, benefit from all these free payments through this service while Venmo can still survive in the market by having some sort of revenue. And actually, interestingly, Venmo just launched their own credit card today. So if you have time later, you can check it out on the website. Yeah, so that's my end of presentation. And today we're very, very fortunate to invite Bruce Gibney, who is a venture capitalist, who is also early investors of PayPal, Lyft, and SpaceX. He also wrote two books, The Nonsense Factory. And today he and his associate, Carlos, will be here to give a presentation and also answer all of your questions.
Great. Okay, thanks, Summer, and thank you guys for having me. I hope everyone is, as safe as they can be in this bizarre year as we all go sliding down the razor blade of life. So yes, I was a VC at Founders Fund. I'm now at Carmenta, sort of semi-retired. But I started investing in 1997. My first investment was in PayPal, which is now sort of the part of the Venmo, eBay empire. But and also Airbnb and Spotify from earlier in the slides, and a couple other things that did not work, and then some other things that did, including Palantir and Asana last week. So sometimes there are happy endings to these stories. Rather than the sort of customary lecture, and forgive me, I'm a bit rusty. It's been a while since I've done a class. Rather than the customary lecture where we sort of focus on the nitty gritty of like A/B testing or revenue models, what have you, I want to sort of talk about the startup ecosystem and venture and technology sort of more holistically, and along the way debunk a lot of the sort of claims that are made or the sort of conventional wisdom that people receive over the years, because obviously a lot of us either are, would like to be, or have come back from, or about to go to, what are sort of loosely called startups, either genuine startups where you can 4 people and in a warehouse somewhere in Potrero Hill, or a quasi startup that has 2,000 people and $500 million of revenue, or hopefully more than that. And the first question I think that you have to sort of confront as students is whether or not the startup life is for you. And is this really how you want to spend your 20s? You're at a great engineering school, one of the finest, and you could get a job at one of the sort of, customary tech behemoths, or even something, that's a little bit sort of, more conventional, be it, General Motors or what have you, which actually still exists and actually does real engineering work. The startup life is hard, and I'd submit to you that if you have any doubts about whether or not the startup life is for you, whether it's being a founder of a company or working at a startup, it's probably not the right fit. It's a sufficiently difficult thing to do, and it takes so long, and you'll suffer so much adversity that it's the sort of thing that you do only if you really feel compelled to do it. Those are the people who are happiest. They also tend to be the companies that work the best. It's not really something that you can force yourself to do, like working at a law firm, which I did for all of 370 days. You really have to want to do that. And the reason why is, as you know, most startups will fail. And even if yours succeeds, it's not clear that you'll actually end up doing what it is that you wanted to do in the first place. For one thing, a lot of people start, they get into startups and they have a vision of how their job is going to be. They view themselves as a product person or a builder of companies and what have you. And what most founders quickly find, and what most early employees quickly find, I need to find a barber, but what most employees quickly find is that what they think of as their real job, whether it's designing rockets or, coding or, UX or what have you, ends up not being the real job. The real job for most early employees, because they will be sort of, more senior, is human resources and investor relations and operations management. So if what you're thinking is that none of you think it will be easy, but if what you think is that you're going to end up spending the bulk of your time on a part of engineering that you really love, the answer is that you won't. If you really want to do engineering on a day-to-day basis, you're actually better off working for someone else. But if you have a burning desire to found a company because nothing out there scratches the itch for you, if there's a service or a product or a market segment that just doesn't exist or that you don't find satisfactory and you feel like you have to address it, then it can be a great life. Benjamin Disraeli and Toni Morrison, both of them have a great line in there. Morrison was a writer, Disraeli was a writer before he became Prime Minister of England. If they were asked why they write books, and they said, well, I like to read, and if I want to read a book, I'll just write it myself. And that's sort of the philosophy that you have to have as a startup founder. I want to talk a bit about how long startups last, because and a recurring theme throughout this sort of talk will be, you need to approach each and every piece of the startup experience from first principles and see if what people are telling you, your co-founders, your employees, your venture capitalists, your professors, what have you, actually makes sense to you. And frequently you'll find that it doesn't. But first I want to talk about how long startups last. When I did my first investment in PayPal in 97, 98, that company was public by 2002 and was acquired by eBay by October of 2002. That was 4.5 years soup to nuts, really. Now companies, it's not uncommon to see 10, 15, 17 years in the case of one of my companies that went public last week. This is a very long haul. And the reason why this matters is, one, you sort of need to be in it for a long time. Two, business models, which I guess is was the theme of the sort of intro. Your business model will change a lot. So you shouldn't be too wedded to an idea, nor should you beat yourself up if your product and your vision for the company change. They should change and they will change. That's normal. Even PayPal in its brief 4-year existence went through about 4 business models before it landed on the right business model. Many companies that I've seen that have lasted a decade will go through, 24 business models. You'll just have to adapt. It's more likely than not that your first business model will not only be wrong, but it will be wildly wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that. And more to the point, most VCs, the vast majority, understand this. And so when you go in and you pitch them, or when you are pitched as a potential employee, let's say by, I guess no one has roommates during COVID, or maybe you do, but when you're pitched by whoever who's going to be your co-founder or your future boss or whatever, and they come to you with a business model, and this sort of seems outlandish, or it can't work, or it seems underbaked, don't really worry about that too much. That's not going to be the real business model. That will change over time, and that's all right. It really is. It's fine. No venture capitalist expects that you're going to adhere to your first business model. And if you're really adamant about it, they might actually have concerns that you're not sufficiently flexible. There are, of course, some companies whose business models are evergreen. Google has not essentially changed its business model since it was founded, not on a revenue basis, not on a profit basis. It's all basically ads. So there are some exceptions, but most companies will change. And why also does the long life of a startup matter? And of course, companies don't cease to exist when they go public. They just enter a different phase, and hopefully they'll be around for a century or more. But why also does this matter? And one of the reasons why it matters, and we can get into the causality, but that's not really a big deal. The simple fact is that it is it used to be the case in the in the 90s, very briefly, where you could just come up with a product and people would invest based on the product. But every product, right, depends on this sort of fundamental assumption that you are creating something new, and either you're disrupting something or you're creating an entirely new space. But of course, insofar as that's your premise, that will be the next generation's premise, that they can do the same thing. You will be disrupted in turn. A product is not really investable over any meaningful time scale. So what you have to build is a platform, a real company that can churn out multiple products and multiple services and create an enduring advantage. And the difference really is the difference between a Nest thermostat and Nest itself. Now, we can actually ask a question about whether or not Nest is a real company. It is now, that is part of some other company, but so the original Nest is sort of like a smart thermostat, but in fact, actually Nest as a company sells basically home Big Brother, right? And that's sort of extensible. Just as Dyson originally sold you vacuums, now everything with a fan can be a Dyson product. But if you're going to last a long time, you have to ultimately build a platform on which you can build a succession of different products. Otherwise, you just won't make it. Because remember, again, your fundamental logic is that you can go and disrupt someone. So in turn, someone should be able to disrupt you. And ultimately, with a platform, you can create a sort of branding and network barrier to entry, and that will create durable value. So one of the things that you should be looking for as a potential employee, and that venture capitalists will be looking for, is whether or not there's an actual company there, as opposed to just a better mousetrap. The better mousetrap is not ultimately an economically defensible item. So one thing that you want to do after you've had your sort of idea for your initial product and your initial platform, and again, the platform will change, it will evolve, that's fine, is who do you want to build it with? And again, keep in mind that the average startup now lives longer than the average American marriage. You're stuck with these people for a very long time. We actually looked a while back at portfolio companies, early stage, mid stage, what have you. Most successful companies are teams, and they're started by at least a pair of co-founders and up to 4. After 4, the returns become actually diminishing as squabbling sort of becomes the dominant dynamic instead of collaboration. But somewhere between 2 to 4 seems to be the optimal number. Now, this is especially challenging for you right now. of course, because college is the place where you should make a lot of these sorts of friendships and develop these networks of people that you're going to found companies with, that you're going to work with, who will hire you in turn, who will ultimately be your VCs. I don't have a great answer for how to replicate that experience over Zoom, but I do know that once you have the ability to safely, mingle with your colleagues, you should do that. And in fact, it's actually probably more important than any education you're going to get, any sort of quantitative education that you're going to get in your engineering program, because ultimately you can learn on your own time, but you have a fairly limited window to make a whole bunch of friends who are going to survive with you through your 20s and 30s on this project or just in life in general. And so you should be spending time on that. So I guess what I'm saying is once COVID is over, you should go to a lot of parties if you can. Some of my best friends are still, for better or for worse, the people I went to college or graduate school with. Those are people you can trust, what they're like under a variety of circumstances. And ultimately, because the product changes, because your business plan will change, the only thing that you can really sort of count on at first, and certainly this is my perspective as a venture capitalist, is the team. That's what people are really investing in, is a group of people who work well together and who will be able to sort of roll with the punches as the business evolves, as the macroeconomy evolves, or in our present phase, devolves, as circumstances change. That's certainly why I invested in PayPal. I met Peter. He was the smartest non-engineer I had met, the smartest non-scientist I had met. That was good enough for me. The original business model was not obviously viable on paper, but I had absolute faith in Peter's ability to figure it out. And later, when I met Max, absolute faith in his ability to figure out. Turns out they merged with a company that was run by a guy named Elon Musk. He also turns to be, out to be pretty good at figuring things out. It was a good team. And part of the proof is that the PayPal team not only figured out PayPal, but it figured out Yammer, it figured out Palantir, it figured out SpaceX, it figured out Tesla, it figured out a firm, it figured out a whole bunch of other things, other companies. And that was all based on just me thinking that some other guy was smart and a hard worker and reasonable. And that's what you want to be looking for in your co-founders, and that's what you want to be looking for in your employees. And as a venture capitalist, that's the kind of team that you want to invest in at the early stage. Later, when there are real products and revenues and so forth, you can get into a more detailed analysis. But for Series C, Series A, even probably not Series B, it's the team that matters most. There is no company that I'm aware of where the product was so good that the team didn't matter, that nothing else mattered, that people would just use the product. Maybe Google, but even that's an arguable case. So let's say that you've gathered together a team. You want a team that's complementary. Actually, let's talk about team dynamics. Since we're doing this in chronological order, who do you really want to work with? Keep in mind, this is basically going to be your family for 10 years. Who can you stand for 10 years? You will lose, by the way, as many friends as you gain during this process. I'm sorry to say, that's just the way it is. And one of the most difficult things you're going to have to do in the startup process is you're going to have to fire friends. And I've done this, and you will have to do it. And if you're the sort of person for whom that is distasteful, and more power to you if you are, this is not the right business for you. You will lose a lot of people along the way. This is unfortunate because they will be very important to you, or you will be fired in turn, unfortunately. But let's talk about team dynamics. Frequently, what you'll see is a sort of an unbalanced team as these things cohere, because at Berkeley and at Stanford, what we're trained to do is to view sort of engineering as the highest possible good, and intelligence as the scarcest resource. And this leads to teams that are composed basically entirely of engineers. This is not the best way to build a team. You want a team with multiple competencies. At Facebook, for example, they had Sean. Sean has engineering chops, to be sure. Sean Parker. He was originally at Napster and then joined the Facebook. But he was really good. He was really good at branding. He was really good at business, and this provided a great counterweight to Mark. Sean was the person who got them. Just even from a marketing perspective, it was originally the Facebook. It was actually the very first venture deal I worked on after PayPal. Was the first outside investment in Facebook. It was the Facebook at the time. It was structured as a Delaware LLC, which was uninvestable. So it had to be restructured, and Sean convinced him to drop the Facebook for Facebook. And now, so what you want is a diversity of talents. You want people who can interface with customers. I would actually recommend a physicist for this. Find a physicist who is unhappy in their physics program and have them handle investor relations and customer relations. Physicists can explain anything. It doesn't matter what your product is. It doesn't matter what your business is. One of their core competencies is to explain anything lucidly and in a slightly condescending and intimidating way. This is who you should hire for investor relations and for customer acquisition, because whatever your idea is, they'll be able to articulate it. Physicists are great. Mathematicians, also great for this. I had an algebraic topologist to help me out. And that is terrific. You'll want a people person. I know this is sort of like a weird thing, but turns out that people skills are important when you're hiring lots of people. Hiring is extremely difficult. You're going to have to, unfortunately, be willing to cycle through a lot of people. You will make a lot of mistakes. Again, venture capitalists are fine with that. You should be fine with it. Not all of your hires are going to work. Not all of your co-founders, by the way, are going to work. And so you should just be prepared to iterate with people as quickly as you are with product. It's kinder to the person. Accelerate their vesting, move them out. They'll find a better company for them, and it's kinder to the employees who stay. It is a difficult thing to do. It is one of the hardest skills to learn, and it's one of the skills you have to learn earliest. And so, over time, how do you recruit people? This is the question I get most as a VC. This is not my job, honestly. And one of the sort of biggest red flags that you can get from a potential startup is them asking you for help hiring people, because really hiring is a core competency. So just in the same way that you wouldn't expect to go to a venture capitalist and say, please debug my code, nor should you expect to go to a venture capitalist and say, please help build out my team. Hiring people is a core function for you. And again, this is where your networks come in handy. So everyone that basically you just expand it out. You get together a group of 5 people, that's nucleus for starting your company. The 4 other people, you ask them to find 5 people. It's basically a pyramid scheme in the guise of HR, but you have to just do this over and over, and you have to be ruthless about it. At one of my companies, we had the 10 Smartest Friends program, and basically we asked everyone for a list of their 10 smartest friends who weren't already working for the company, and then we would just go out and try to hire them. And if that worked, then everyone would get a little bonus. But you just constantly have to be hiring people. And you should hire, you should probably err on the side of over-hiring. And this is why you should constantly be raising money, which we'll get back to in a minute. Now, so you've got the team in place, you sort of have the product and maybe an idea for a platform in place. One of the key questions is, and I think you might have had a speaker earlier in the series who addressed the concept of TAM, total addressable market. This is a wonderful heuristic, but not in the way that most people think. Think really carefully about your total addressable market. I see, endless amounts of presentations coming in with, these giant total addressable markets. And this leads to the phenomena, and you have to ask how practical this really is, and I sort of, how many Bentleys can you sell to customers in China? And people come in and they're like, well, we can sell 1 Bentley to every person in China. And that's just not going to work. For one thing, each Bentley requires an average of 11 cows to produce the hide. So that is, 15 billion cows that you're going to have to slaughter. So just right off the bat, the math doesn't work. This, to take a less trivial example, this is also how most traditional VCs, and there were almost no traditional VCs in the Theranos deal, knew that Theranos wasn't going to work, because they presented a total addressable market that was absolutely enormous. And all you had to do, because there's essentially a testing duopoly in the United States, was look at how many tests LabCorp and Quest Corp performed. And there was no way that Theranos, even if it took half the market, was going to get anywhere near its sort of goal number. So you'd be surprised how often simple arithmetic will allow you to gut check whether or not your own suppositions or those that are being proffered to you by potential partnership candidates, by potential acquirers, by competitors, by venture capitalists, will allow you just to gut check whether or not what they're saying makes any sense whatsoever. Just do simple arithmetic. It's shocking how much of this business is done by simple arithmetic, including, by the way, IPO evaluations. It's actually extraordinarily easy to figure out what a company will go public for. Now, of course, Morgan Stanley will still win its $80 million. If you're in software as service, you take 20 as the price to sales multiple, and you adjust it up or down based on whether or not you're growing faster than Slack. And if you're growing faster than Slack, you just divide your growth rate by Slack's, and you use that multiple against 20. And if you're growing slower, you use the less than one number, you multiply by 20, and basically 9 times out of 10, you're going to get exactly what a SaaS company is going public for. Whether that should be the case or should not be the case, it is. Arithmetic answers a lot of questions in life. All right, so now you've gotten your team. You have hopefully a platform. You have to figure out whether or not your initial product is worth doing. Of course, by this point, you're committed because you've already conned all your friends into starting this business, and you've taken out a loan from mom and dad. And so where is the sweet spot in terms of creating a business, technology-wise? And this is a challenge. And most people either err on the side of too simple or way too hard. And so way too hard is fusion. That's just too difficult. For someone who has 5 friends working on this and $10 million in the bank, fusion is too hard. At the same time, mobile game is too easy. Anyone can do it. There's no barrier to entry. So you have to pick something that is just on the verge of implausible. That's really the best thing. So in the case of SpaceX, for example, what seemed implausible at the time was that rockets could be slightly cheaper. Now, I actually got a huge amount of pushback from the investment community about SpaceX, which we did the first outside round along with DFJ, because it just seemed too weird. This is always great. If you can find something that seems really, really weird, but actually is entirely practical, there's probably a lot of value to be created. This always struck me as very strange. We had, after all, put people on the moon 50 years ago. So why was it inconceivable that someone else could build a rocket? Oh, and people said, oh, well, a private company building a rocket. All the rockets that the United States has built were built by private companies. So there was literally no reason other than the fact that it involved space, that this was technologically impractical. It was a little bit hard, for sure. And it was weird, so it traded at a discount. And it turned out a great space to be in. And there are other examples. Even Facebook is an example. It was dismissed originally as too simple, but it turns out, as you guys all know from your courses in statistics and probability, and you can do the whole factorial thing, managing a large number of connections is extremely difficult. We learned this the hard way with Friendster, which probably none of you know about, but it was an early social network. And it was like, it took you 10 minutes to log in. Once the system had more than 15,000 people on it, basically you need a supercomputer to run it. So it seemed computationally not scalable. Social networks seemed computationally not scalable. Facebook found a way to do it. So people have been burned by MySpace. They've been burned by Friendster. It was kind of a dead area to invest in. It seemed too technologically difficult. Again, I know it's hard to believe, with benefit of hindsight, but it was just hard enough that's really sort of the sweet spot for you, is just hard enough. Um, and it helps along the way to gut check yourself when you're assessing whether or not the company is just hard enough, which provides your barrier to entry and thus ultimately your profit margin. Whether or not your assessment of just hard enough is realistic. Is it because, I don't know, you're a defeatist? Like sometimes I can be a defeatist. In 2020, I feel defeated all the time. Or is it because you're an insane optimist? Or is it because that you know something that no one else does? And this is always the best place to be in. So one of the key questions, the gut checks you should have for yourself, is when you're starting a company or introducing a product at an existing company, is what do I know about this space, about this technology, about this product that no one else does? Then you should test it. There is a tendency to be, super secretive, because lest I share my great idea with my roommate, then he will run out and copy it, or she will run out and copy it. That's not going to happen. First of all, people are too lazy. Second of all your ideas will be viewed as crazy, hopefully. That will provide your barrier to entry. No one's going to steal your idea. I used to worry about this a lot. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really happen. So go and ask your friends who you trust, preferably a friend who you think is smarter than you, whether or not your secret has any reality to it. And if they say, oh my God, I never thought of it before, but it makes complete sense, or let me get back to you, and they come back and say, oh my God, it makes complete sense, then great. And if they come back and tell you something like, actually, this was invented 1,000 years ago, I actually know this. There's a friend of mine got a PhD. The one thing he didn't do before getting his PhD was check to see if anyone had solved the problem before, and it turned out that someone had. This is a bad realization to have. So, go out, check, see if someone's done it before, see if your idea passes the smell test with your friends. Don't be afraid to share it. No one's going to copy it. By the way, if they could copy it, again, this is where, simple logic really is your friend. If simply by having a conversation in the dorm or the cafeteria or wherever people are allowed to have conversations in a circle 6 feet away, in full view of everyone else, at the Greek theater, whatever, if someone could really go out and replicate it the next day, there was probably no barrier to entry for the idea in the first place. So don't be afraid to road test your idea. Go out, check it out, see if it makes sense with your smart friends, and if it does, then maybe it's time to think about money. And one final word on product versus platform. One thing you want to be very careful about is making sure that you don't have a pseudo platform. A pseudo platform ends up looking like a movie studio. So let's say that you're a game developer and you have 1,000 games and you're going to put out another 500 games. It can feel like a platform because you can just churn out games. Now, maybe you have some infrastructure advantage, or a payment processing advantage or a plumbing advantage that actually genuinely allows you to crank out games and provides technological competitive advantage. If you do, great, then you do have a platform. If not, then what you have is a movie studio. And unless your movie studio has the option on Marvel movies, it's not going to be great. You really don't want to have a studio business, as we all see from the movie business. Some of them are blockbusters, some of them aren't. No one actually knows which is going to hit. That's not a great business to be in. You want to be in something that is repeatably good, even if the product is terrible, like, for example, with a lot of Marvel movies. Okay, now you figured out whether or not you're a product or a platform or a pseudo platform. You've gotten the team in place. You shared your idea with your smart friends. You've somehow emerged from 2020 intact psychologically, financially, and otherwise. Then you have to go out and decide if you're actually going to do the business. And this is actually challenging. One of the sort of dirty secrets in venture capital and startup land is a lot of it is luck. You already knew this. And a lot of it depends on timing. There are actually good times to start businesses and bad times to start businesses. And companies and funds that are started in bad times basically never recover. It is sort of a version of the lifetime earnings problem that a lot of you, unfortunately, will soon be facing, which is that if there's a hit to lifetime earnings due to a recession, when you graduate. The literature is very robust. These earnings will basically never be recovered. A large part of them are just lost forever. The good news, however, is that for companies, actually, the tail end of a recession is a terrific time to start companies. A lot of my best companies were started between 2002 and 2004 in the aftermath of the dot-com bubble, and between 2008 and 2011 during the financial crisis. You know, Airbnb, Lyft, Palantir, if you go back a little bit earlier, and what have you. So it actually turns out to be a great time to start businesses, in part because it's easier to acquire engineering talent, and in part because everyone else is just super discouraged and things are breaking right and left and old models aren't working, and so there's a space for you. So there is some sunshine for people in the startup community. Everyone else, it's not great, just to be honest. Ultimately, for your company to succeed, however, unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, you do need the sort of mid-life of the company, the later life of the company to coincide with a macroeconomic boom. This is becoming decreasingly likely in the United States. Economic growth has been very, very slow. Most of the valuations that you see are not the result of fundamentals, really. I mean, they're not entirely divorced from fundamentals, but they are in large part dependent on fiscal and monetary accommodation. So what you have to hope for is that your life cycle aligns with the economic life cycle. There are things that you can do to adjust your life cycle along the way, and you should do them. Many companies will sort of ignore this on the hope that if they're growing 80% a year, that will be enough. That will not be enough. You can look at the history of multiples. They expand and they contract. You want to go out at a time when you have when expanding multiples, raising funds, going public, whatever it is, being acquired, expanding into new lines of business, if you choose to stay private. You will have to carefully time your fundraising and your growth and investment cycles with a macroeconomic cycle. Ideally, you want to lead it by 1 or 2 years. A lot of people ignore this, and some of those companies which had genuinely good ideas, they go away. So there are an enormous number of things that actually you have to consider as an early employee and a founder. It's truly not just about product. It's about team. It's about regulatory. You can't ignore the government, which a lot of companies like to do. You can't ignore the macroeconomic cycles. You can't ignore labor laws, which unfortunately a lot of companies like to do. You can't ignore tax laws. The easiest way to achieve that final doubling for your investors is to spend 20 minutes researching the tax code when you incorporate. There is, by the way, a way when your companies, when you start out, you're worth less than $50 million, for you to ensure that the entire first investment of your venture capitalists, including your own investment as startup employees with your option package, is federally tax-free forever. It's called Section 1202. Virtually no founder knows about it. You will be very glad that you know about it eventually. 100% of your gains are legally tax-free on your Series A if you just make the requisite filing. So there are 1,000 little things that you have to know, and that being overly focused on what you think of as your job, your real job, can distract you from. You know, when I started writing, which is a new career for me, I thought my real job was to write. And it turns out my real job was to hassle my publisher to order enough paper so that the book could be printed. And my real job was to go out on TV and do shows and to do promotion. My real job was sales. The writing actually occupied 20% of the time. It was the most rewarding part, but it turns out to have been almost entirely irrelevant to the product that was the book. And this is, I should have known that because I've seen it with companies. I just suspended disbelief because I really enjoy writing. And one of the things you can't do is allow yourself to be seduced by the romance of the company or the product that you're creating. All right, well, anyway, now you figured out the tax code, the labor laws, privacy regulations, both here and abroad. You've collected your team somehow despite COVID, figured out your product, your initial version 1 of 2,000 versions of your business plan. You have to go out and you have to raise money. And again, this is where the long haul, the long view really pays off. Because if you think that you just have a product, or if you think the life cycle of a startup is 4 years, you might actually be indifferent to where you take money from. Maybe you just take it from the fanciest VC, or maybe you take it from the first VC, or the VC that offers you the highest valuations. And I'm here to tell you that you should not. You should take it from the VC that offers you an acceptable valuation that you think that you can tolerate for 15 years, because you will be stuck with them. You really, really will be stuck. And even if they cease to show up at board meetings, which by the way, they will, except when it's time to go public, they will still have to okay little pieces of paper that can, if they don't sign in a prompt and timely fashion, prove to be a major headache to your life. So you want to find a VC that you really like working with. And one of the things that you should do along the way, and ultimately the VC sort of has control at the early stages because they have the money, they can say yes or no, is you have to assess whether or not the claims the VCs are making are true. Because if the VC makes claims that to you using simple arithmetic or logic are palpably false, they are either lying to you or idiots. And so let's go through a few of the claims that VCs make. Well, actually, let's focus just on one particular claim, which is that we will provide more than capital, which is their way of saying that we're in it, we'll give you more than money. All right, I'm sure all of you have heard this before. There are even, firms named like Capital Plus or, VC, whatever. And people will tell you that, yes, we're going to help you with a variety of things. We'll help you with hiring. One prominent VC does go out and they advertise they're going to help you with hiring. Again, as we already discussed, that should be a core competency for you. So you should need their help. But they'll say, we'll help you with marketing, we'll help you with hiring, we'll help you with this, we'll help you with that. And if you look at, your typical VC, they have, something like 5 general partners and 10 associates, and something like 150 to 300 portfolio companies over their multiple funds. And mathematically, that gives them somewhere between 8 and 20 working days a year for your company, if you assume that all they do is pay attention to their companies instead of buy yachts or worry about their own investors or host open, whatever, brush their teeth, take a shower, whatever it is. And 8 to 15 days per year, they're not going to help your company. Really, that's just not a promise mathematically that they can live up to. They might live up to it for some companies, the companies they like the most or they think have the highest chances of success. But if they're making that broad claim with respect to all of you, to all their companies, that should be a cause for alarm, because again, there's mathematically no way that they can do that. You will be lucky if they even pay attention to you. And that's very important, because there are critical junctures where they will need to pay attention to you, including follow-on rounds of financing, where their failure to invest again will send a massive negative signal to the market, regardless of whether or not your company is doing great or poorly. And one of the reasons for this is, again, mathematically, VCs are very sort of cognitively limited in the sense that they have almost no time to make decisions and to review the facts before them because of the size of their portfolio, which is a rational strategy for them. And I'm casting no aspersions on VCs in this particular sense. But at most they have an hour to figure out whether or not it's a no. It takes longer to figure out whether or not it's a yes to any particular investment decision. And frequently they figure it out in the first 10 minutes, and the rest of the 15 minutes are just a face-saving exercise for everyone during the course of a pitch or during the course of a conference call or a board meeting. They have almost no time to think about your business. And one of the other things that means for you is, given that your VCs are time constrained, this applies also to your customers, to your to people who are going to, you might want to have joint ventures with and what have you, is that they're all very bandwidth constrained. They have almost no time to make decisions. So when you go out and you try to sell a VC or a business partner, you have to be cognizant of what the arithmetic tells you, which is that people have almost no time for something you've spent almost your entire working life striving toward. So there's a huge mismatch between how you spend your time and how other people will evaluate the results of that time. And you have to be cognizant of it. No product sells itself, no company sells itself. It's mathematically impossible. But this, and even though it seems obvious, it seems to be a lesson that very, very few founders internalize easily and costlessly. It takes some time and some failure to get there. But again, this is where simple math will just help you. You should approach everything in life as a quick arithmetic exercise. What's my stake going to be in the company when this is all done? How many people do I need to hire? How much money going to need? Do people have time to even listen to my pitch? How much time do I have to communicate? What have you? Don't, when you go into pitch, don't think of the pitch as adversarial. Think of it as an opportunity to test your ideas against reality. VCs have seen a lot of ideas. It's a good opportunity to learn, even though most of these meetings will end up in a null result. That's just the way it is. Don't be discouraged. There are zillions of pitches for great ideas that go unheard, and an order of magnitude more, like 8 quadrillion zillion pitches that are awful, that die a deserved death. And then there are like 10,000 terrible pitches that go on to be funded lavishly and then die. Don't worry about it. Hope that your company's, somewhere in the, in the top 1%. It does need to be in the top 1%. Again, be realistic. Look at the statistics. Survivability for these companies is very, very low. And you have to ask yourself, am I in the, top 1%? And that top 1% is dominated by people, who are not unlike you. So very, very smart people. Went to Berkeley, who went to Stanford, MIT, Caltech. And you have to ask yourself, what do I know that they don't with respect to my particular business? And then you have to figure out how much you'll need. This is a perpetual question. The one thing that VCs actually do know, they don't know anything about your business. They don't know, really, all their coding languages are dead. Everything I learned in college is irrelevant. The one thing they do know a lot about is money. They know when you should raise. They know how much you should be selling. They know roughly what you should pay people. They know when you should go public. You can use them for that. Anything with a dollar sign, VCs are generally good with. You should constantly be raising money. VCs will tell you this. It's not something that you want to do, but probably a third of your time as a founder should be out spending raising money. You will need a lot of it, and it takes a very long time to raise. So go out, do that. That's basically that, and HR are basically your jobs. Again, decide whether or not that's what you really want to do with your life, and go out and raise money all the time. And then once you've gotten to your Series B, then you can finally really sort of start scaling the business up, and abandoning business models and abandoning team members, unfortunately, that haven't worked for you in the past. And during the course of building the business, now people tell you a million things about scaling, how many people you should hire, how many direct, like what the ratio of manager direct reports for this. I mean, there's zillions of presentations about this, like 7 apparently is the magic number. There is no magic number. Whatever the number is, one thing that, people will not tell you when you're scaling the business is the need for accounting honesty. And this is the most important check on your ability to scale a business, because you could be scaling into a void if you choose a metric that is not GAAP based. So GAAP is generally accepted accounting principles. They're generally accepted for a reason, because they bear some, not perfect, but some relationship to reality. What you see with a lot of startups in Series A is fictional accounting. That's fine. The company is like 3 months old. It has no product. It's not even clear if they have, like a lease on the space, or they're like squatters. Don't worry about it. For Series A, you can make up whatever metric you want. Eyeballs, or, customer engagement, or, customer retention rates on the 2 customers you have, mom and dad, whatever it is, you can make up any metric. It's an exercise in creativity. But as you progress, you need to leave those crutches behind and focus on generally accepted accounting principles, because these will tell you how your business is actually doing. And if you do not have an objective check on your business, and keep in mind, venture capitalists are cognitively constrained. It's very difficult for them to parachute in your business and tell you whether or not it's real. I as a venture capitalist cannot walk into an oncology, company. And I have walked into an oncology company. It ended up doing very well. I had no idea why, but scientifically, I can't tell. I can't look at the rat. I can't look at the test tube. I can't look at the PCR results. I can't tell you why it's working. With engineering stuff, like with the rockets at SpaceX, they either blow up or they don't. There are a million different tests that happen along the way. You as sort of a founder of the company or a senior manager will need transparency into areas of the company that are beyond your engineering capacity, right? Because it won't just be one kind of engineering you do, it will be a dozen. And the only way that you'll have transparency in that is, one, a team you trust, who does know something about the relevant subject matter, and two, generally accepted accounting principles, which will tell you whether or not the stuff that people are purporting to sell or purporting to get customers who are not paying or whatever it is they're doing, whether or not there's any reality at all to that. And so I'd encourage you not to rely on fake metrics. Just as you wouldn't rely on sort of fake engineering tests, you wouldn't take, for example, like a 50% confidence interval and say our drug works, right? Because that's meaningless. You shouldn't do that for GAP. You shouldn't do, a 90% confidence interval for statistical testing, for A/B testing, whatever it is. You shouldn't cut yourself so much slack that so you really don't know whether or not your company is doing well. Because one of the things about a company that's growing quickly is you will lose touch with the core of the business very, very quickly at a sort of emotional and intuitive level. So you will need a variety of checks, reality-based checks on the company. A lot of people will tell you that they're not necessary, but they really, really are. And this is a particular problem because companies are staying private for a long time. And one of the difficulties with staying private for a long time is the private market doesn't require you to use GAAP. The public markets, you do. It's just basically, it's an exchange requirement. You have to do it. And so when you go public, it's an encounter with reality. And in fact, it's an encounter with reality 3 years at a time, because you have to have 3 years of GAAP audited financials. You want to be able to survive that encounter with reality, and the best way to do that is to embrace reality almost from the get-go. Series C, Series A, you actually need to suspend disbelief, because statistically, none of these companies are going to work. I mean, a vanishingly small percentage. So what you should do is you should be entirely unreasonable when you start the company. But as soon as you have, a number of employees, a number of investors and scale, and these investors aren't just faceless pieces of money. They're venture capitalists who represent university endowments, including possibly your current university's endowment. You have responsibilities to them, and one of them is to constantly engage with reality. And so I'd encourage you to do that. And going public is the most brutal encounter with reality that you can have. So even if you don't choose to go public immediately, you should be prepared to go public immediately. One of the other things, and this is an area of controversy and where my own thinking has changed over time, and probably one of the areas that I'm most deeply associated with and that I now have some reservations about, is the founder-friendly structure. So the truly first big founder-friendly structure, I actually did some of the legal work for back when I kind of still practiced law, when I was working for Peter Thiel's family office, and that was for Facebook. Now, family, sort of founder-friendly structures or family company structures or super voting structures have been around for a long, long time. One of the things that does frustrate me is that the media treats founder-friendly structures as some sort of appalling aberration and a sinister sort of trilateral commission Illuminati plot that works solely to benefit the tech elite. The first people to practice the founder-friendly structure were actually the big media companies. The most prominent for almost 50 years was the New York Times, which gave control to the Sulzberger family. So there are good reasons why the New York Times has a super voting structure to assure the independence of the news. We can debate whether or not that has been successful in various years, but overall, the Times is a thriving organization. And there were good reasons in the early 2000s why a founder-friendly structure was very appealing, because in the early 2000s, venture capitalists replaced between 1/3 and 2/3 of all founders in their companies, depending on the time horizon you looked at. So basically, to take VC money was to guarantee that you would be fired. You were writing your own termination notice. And that was ridiculous, both on the VC's part. Actually, it was ridiculous on everyone's part because, again, as we discussed earlier, the asset that you're investing in as a VC in an early stage company is not the product. It's not some Delaware corporation. It's the people. And the craziest thing that you can do if you've invested in a small group of people is to turn around 6 months later and throw away that asset, which is essentially what you do by firing founders. So people push more and more into the founder-friendly structure, and I was a big advocate for it for a long time. And it turns out the founder-friendly structure works really, really well if you have truly exceptional founders. There aren't that many truly exceptional founders. Now, in my prior life, very lucky to work with a number of them. But there are probably 2, maybe 3 dozen of them every year, and there are probably 1,000 startups that get truly meaningful funding over the course of the same period. So the founder-friendly structure, as a general rule, mathematically just doesn't make sense. You can even just sort of look at this. You sort of like look at the number of unicorns each year. It's like somewhere between 50 and 150. 150 if there's fiscal and monetary accommodation. 25 to 50 if there isn't, which is again why you have to pay attention to macro. If we're willing to be generous and assume all those people have good founders, that's the most founder-friendly structures you want to see in the course of a given year, and you see literally thousands of them. Founder-friendly structure ends up being not friendly to either founders, founding employees, venture capitalists, or other stakeholders, except in the most exceptional cases. And one of the questions you have to ask yourself, either as an employee interviewing with a company that has an aggressively founder-friendly structure, or as a future VC, or as a founder yourself, is whether or not you're another Mark Zuckerberg or Daniel Ek or Elon Musk. And the answer, even for founders who do very well, who produce an 8 or a 12 or a 15x for themselves, who employ hundreds of people in well-paying jobs and create products that people genuinely like, is that they shouldn't be in charge forever, and they shouldn't have dictatorial control. So enlightened despotism only works if the despot is enlightened, and that is a very, very hard thing to find. And if you look throughout history, there aren't that many examples. There's like Lee Kuan Yew and Frederick the Great, maybe Joseph II, and they're the exceptions to the rule. And the same is true in startup land. So don't push for eternal founder control simply because it's fashionable or everyone else is getting. It may not be in the best interests of your company. And again, simple logic will tell you that's the case. There aren't that many exceptional founders. Many of the exceptional founders will be fully committed to their project forever. I mean, I think we can all agree that Larry and Sergey were exceptional founders from Google. After 20 years, they said enough. So you sort of have to be realistic about the structures that you're embedding in your company, because they're very difficult to change after the first 2 or 3 years, and in some cases impossible. So you have to get some things right off the bat. All right, so finally, you have the right structure, you have the right team, you scale. Eventually, you'll have to make a decision about whether or not you want to go public. And I'm going to address this question because I think it's become, I got it from the class, and I think it's become a significant problem of value. Should you go public? And when should you go public? And the answer is, if you have granted employee stock options and you do not have an employee stock tender that can accommodate every single employee and every single one of their options, then you have a moral obligation to go public and to sell your company. Because every time you issue a stock option, you have made a promise to employees that eventually it will be liquid. That's one of the things they accept in exchange for a lower salary, in exchange for not going to work at Google or Facebook, where they could be an E6 or, or what have you. You've made a promise to your investors, you made a promise to your employees implicitly by equity compensation, by taking outside investment, you will go public. And you need to do that. And if you don't, the employees will become disgruntled. And this will create a mismatch, because one of the things you will discover as a founder or a senior employee or an early employee is that you will be able to sell your stake to people like me, but your employees will not. And this is a cultural tension and a matter of fairness that ultimately becomes toxic for a company. So Some companies have managed to bridge the gap by creating employee tender programs. Some companies have been very straightforward with their employees that they have no plans to go public in the medium or even the fairly longish term. Companies like SpaceX, those are unique. Other companies don't. And so if you make a promise, you have to make good on that promise. Otherwise, people will have no reason to trust you as an executive. So companies are staying private for too long. It means they've avoided gap. It means they've avoided paying off an obligation to their stakeholders. I do not think it's healthy for companies. So you should go public. But going public at the same time is not the only thing you should be getting out of the company. You really want to build something you're truly proud of, and that creates actual social value, because these end up being the only enduring companies. There are very few companies that are completely financially cynical that work. I've had maybe 3 that I knew going in, or I did them anyway, and I knew it was just sort of a return play, and I thought, either Google will buy them or whatever. But by and large, every cynical investment has tended to fail. Most investments tend to fail. The investments that truly have a social purpose will tend to over survive. Most of them do not survive, but they do tend to over survive. Some of you have asked, and this has gotten you all the way through IPO, so see how easy startups are. You've got the life cycle all the way through. You're not public, you can retire, great. Actually, if you really like the company, you'll stick around for a long, long time. But one of the things I mentioned was macro, and one of the questions I got from the class is are we all sort of toast? Because it certainly feels like it in 2020. My first book, I blame the baby boomers for the decay of the economy and social institutions. And so there is a question about whether or not it makes sense to do anything at this point. Maybe everyone should just hunker down at Microsoft or Apple or some company that's going to survive and hope for the best. Or maybe it just doesn't make sense to start or to try anything at all because everything is so bleak. So just how bad a situation are we emerging into? Are we all going to emerge from the bunker of college or finance and find that there's, we have a great idea and a great company, but there's nothing but sort of like Terminator, like ashes scattering around? That is actually a possibility. But I think it's one we should discount. But we should be realistic about. The simple fact is that the macroeconomy is in extremely bad shape, which means that customers, B2C, B2B, B to any other letter of the alphabet, they are going to be difficult to acquire. They will have fairly limited disposable income. This suggests where you should be focusing your attention, either on sort of low end or ultra high end consumers, or on sort of companies that have very large defensible businesses, and maybe not on sort of mid-range customers, which for a lot of startups in the mid-2000s were sort of the bread and butter. The macroeconomy is in very difficult shape. It is hard to see as a result of the overhang of debt, the failure to invest in research and development, which, by the way, will impact your own ability to innovate. A lot of the things that we rely upon now are the result of government programs that basically concluded in the late 1960s or early 1970s, from the internet to sort of the rudimentary bits of most user interfaces to GPS. SpaceX wouldn't exist without GPS. Google Maps wouldn't exist without GPS. Most of the guts of the smartphone industry would not exist without the military-industrial complex funding semiconductors in the 1940s through the 1970s. The amount of research and development dollars that have been pouring in to the economy in general has declined by almost 2/3 on the government side, sponsored side of things. On the corporate sponsored side of things, in terms of hard technology, it's declined as well. And most of course, corporate R&D, the benefits were down to the corporations that fund it. So in terms of pure public goods, like the very university that you're attending right now, Most public goods have been systematically defunded, and the most critical of which is research and development. We are running out of things to monetize that were invented in the 1960s. These weren't mature technologies in the 1960s. They weren't even mature technologies in the 1990s. The difference between pets.com and Chewy, one of which was an infamous disaster and the other which is somehow an enormous success, really boils down to bandwidth and cheap laptops and a sort of social habituation through Amazon. Is really just is the product of continued technological development along a linear path that was established in 1969. And so you have to ask yourself, how much tailwind are you going to get from R&D? And the answer is maybe not that much, which probably suggests something to you about where you should, what kind of companies you should be building. If you can no longer count on publicly funded R&D to provide an enormous tailwind for you, you either have to count on a large corporate partner, or a corporate platform. So in the case of SpaceX, for example, low-cost launch services, which spawns things like Planet Labs and 1,000 other sort of things that want to do things from space, be it from micro-G manufacturing to telemetry, to hedge funds spying on Walmart parking lots to see how many customers are in them on any given thing. You either have to piggyback off of a corporate platform that's providing that R&D, find an area of government R&D that will continue to provide headwinds. Presently, there's some in renewable technologies, although we'll see how that goes on November 3rd. Or you have to invest in it yourself, which is why I think you've started to see over the past few years a transition from sort of what was my original bread and butter, which were consumer internet companies, which cost basically nothing to start and cost less than nothing now with Amazon Web Services, to companies that are trying to do harder and harder things. They're actually making things where there's a huge amount of research and development. Even sort of fake meat, right, turns out to be incredibly intensive from the point of capital, from the point of engineering skill, even from the point of physical space. It turns out it's actually hard to grow fake meat. One of the reasons why is you have to aerate the fake meat if it's actually animal-based, and as the bubbles go through the meat matrix, they'll just rip the muscle off the wafer. So there are 1,000 weird little technologies you have to develop along the way that no one else has developed before. And people will fund them now. They really will. They'll be excited to fund them. And the great thing about funding your own research and development is that you own it. You have a patent. It's a 20-year barrier to entry that you can monetize to the hilt. It's a monopoly. It's a legal monopoly. And people are okay with that now in a way that they weren't 15 years ago. So if in your true heart of hearts, you're a hardcore engineer and you were really worried that what you really wanted to do was serious engineering that involved a giant lab and setting things on fire and a production line and robots, and that no one would fund that and that there would be no return for you, I'm telling you, the macroeconomy basically commands that that's the sort of startup that you should be doing right now. Do not be afraid to do that. That is one of the glimmers of good news that's come out of our macroeconomic predicament. The other thing that's come out of our macroeconomic predicament is you're going to have to chase after super high value customers, and you're going to have to attract a lot of capital, and you want that capital to be as cheap as possible. And one of the things that no one will ever tell you when you are running a capital intensive company, which probably over the long haul, most of you will be, even companies that seem like they should be capital light turn out over the years to have raised multiple billions of dollars. They spend a lot of it on customer acquisition, which is always a question mark. You wouldn't get away with that if you'd stuck with GAAP all the way through, because that's an expense, or stock options under GAAP an expense. But a lot of companies, will spend money on R&D, and that's fine. One of the great things about research and development in factories is there are cheap ways to finance that. One thing that venture capitalists won't tell you, and that you would learn even by a quick Google or talking to your business school friends, is one of the bizarre things is, why is there no debt on the balance sheet of companies that go public? You can pull any S1, which is the regulatory filing for a public company, pre-public company. You can pull any S1. If you look at their capital structure, it's almost all equity. which is very, very strange because the first day of business school or in your first sort of, intro to business class or business for engineers, they'll tell you the capital structure should consist of equity and debt, and that debt is the cheaper of the two options. There is no debt on most of these people's balance sheet, or if there is, it's sort of trivial, or it finances like the corporate credit card and will be turned over in 90 days. It's not real debt. And VCs will tell you, well, that's because only industrial companies get debt, and that's a bad idea, and it's very unreliable, and then we'll give it to you. And the answer is, if you're building a factory, or you have patents, or you have receivables, or if you have a real 1950s style company, and by the way, that's not this country did amazing things in the 1950s. We're still cruising on a lot of them. If you have a real company, people issue debt all day long, and it will cost you nothing. It won't impact your 409A. That'll keep your employees happy because you can keep your valuation high. It won't dilute you. It will be incredibly cheap, and people will be thrilled to give it to you all day long if you have a real company. Again, you should always look for anomalies. The conventional wisdom that's taught in your introduction to whatever class, right? So, there are these, there was one company that actually proposed to violate the laws of thermodynamics. It was a perpetual motion machine. Now, again, I wasn't a great engineer. I just knew this wasn't going to fly. I didn't need to hear any more of the presentation. That was it. It was a perpetual motion machine, violated the laws of thermodynamics. You can go through a million of these things. If anything violates your intro to whatever, intro to electrical engineering, intro to business for engineering majors, that's probably a warning sign. You should stop right there. Same holds for your capital structure. I know I'm bouncing around a bit, but with respect to debt, go out and raise because the macroeconomy demands that you invest heavily in research and development. Again, this is a change from when I came up in VC and startup land. People really didn't want to invest a lot in research and development. Now you're going to have to. No one else is going to do it for you. And to the extent that you have no research lead, you are immediately disruptible because, of course, that's just what you did to someone else. Whatever barrier you thought you could overcome, there's no reason. There's always someone smarter than you, unfortunately. I discover this to my peril every single day. There are a million VCs who are smarter than me. If I can do it, the assumption has to be someone else can do it. So you have to ask yourself, where's your durable competitive advantage coming from? And what better than a legal and technological monopoly granted to you by the state? So go out, patent stuff, raise a whole bunch of debt, do it. It'll be more fun anyway. All right, so that's my bleak view on the macroeconomy, but why it could also be fun for you. And then, there is a question about whether or not the United States will continue to exist in its current form. This is not actually particularly alarmist. This is a question you have to ask yourself. And one reasonable response is, I don't want to start the company in California. I don't want to start it in the United States. Valuations in the United States are high. California is very expensive. It used to be the case that venture capitalists are actually quite lazy and have almost no time, wouldn't drive very far from Palo Alto, which is why every company had to be founded within 60 minutes of Palo Alto. Also, Stanford and Berkeley are there. Now it's the case that venture capital is extremely globalized. The bulk of the dollars now actually go to companies outside the United States. The United States is not doing well right now. Other countries have better growth rates, have more reliable rules of law. You might be from one of those countries, and you might know it well. That might be your competitive advantage. And there's no reason why you shouldn't do it. Because again, there is something odd, and this is again just returning to first principles. Why is that? Is it that through 2010, the bulk of the value in venture capital was created basically a stone's throw from my dormitory at Stanford to your dormitory at Berkeley? One was just due to VC laziness, and two, there's actually, that's the only reason. Most of the world's people are not in the United States. They're certainly not in San Francisco. Most of the world's economy is not in the United States. Not even the plurality of it is really in the United States anymore. So why should your company be in the United States? If you have a compelling reason to be in the United States, other than it is easy to get venture capital funding here, then you should avail yourself of a compelling reason and consider a move elsewhere. This is one of the crucial mistakes that people make, is thinking that you can only do it within 60 miles of Stanford and Berkeley. And there is a way in which that's probably still true. A lot of your friends will be reluctant to move, but the flip side to COVID is people are doing anything from anywhere these days, and your social networks will be much more distributed and virtual than they would have been before. Avail yourself of that tragic fact. People sort of want to know what the story is with me and PayPal. This gets into sort of one of the most important things about startups and about venture capital, and it is not in any way self-aggrandizing, and that's the role of luck. I was super lucky, and that luck I was able to compound. You know, we all know the deal with compound interest, right? It's, you know, it's like this is the first time America, right, with COVID, gruesomely has been reminded of how powerful anything with a, you know, any polynomial is. It's like there's something other than linear growth. There really is. Getting early lucky really helped me because that advantage compounded over time. You know, I took PayPal and I rolled it into Palantir and a house 2 years later, and those compounded. And then I took some money off the table and I threw that compounded money into Spotify and DeepMind, and those compounded. And it all comes back to, yeah, I worked kind of hard to get into Stanford, but it was kind of lucky that I got in because, as we all know, the admissions process, they take all the applications, throw them down a staircase. Whichever one has a sufficiently high SAT that landed at the top of the staircase, that person gets in. That's the admissions process. You know, we're all kind of lucky, but yeah, there was some talent, but a lot of it was luck. And some of it was some amount of judgment in seeing that Peter was basically the smartest person I knew out of a crowd of very, very smart people at Stanford. So the way I sort of think about PayPal or about venture capital or startups, and I've been in some quasi startups myself. You know, when we started the funds, they were tiny. They had no money other than our own. Is you should view these as like a lottery, where in order to buy the lottery ticket, you have to pass a differential calculus test. So you have to be reasonably smart to do that. There are a fair number of people who can do that, but it's a minority of the population. Whether or not you win the lottery after that, that just qualifies to play the lottery. Whether or not you win the lottery after that is kind of out of your hands. And that's how it was with me and PayPal, and that's probably how it'll be with you in business. I mean, probably your co-founder is someone you know already. You probably already know half of your team, even before you knew you wanted to be a founder or work at a startup. And that was just luck of the draw by some random computer in the bottom of Sproul Hall. That's just the way it works. You just have to do the most with it that you can. Here's probably one of the better, probably the best question, because I don't have to answer it and you'll actually get the truth. A lot of you will ultimately, after your startups, either go to another startup or you will be forced to work for the company that acquires your startup for 2 years. There are ways out of it. Try to get bought by Google because they just generally do not expect you to show up at the office. You're supposed to be there for 2 years. You'll never show up. Don't worry about it. Is the next natural thing to do after starting a company is to become a venture capitalist. And some of you in the back of your minds already want to be a venture capitalist. It's a hard career to luck into. You have to probably have done something before or known someone. But if your firm does work out in the, let's say, $300 million to $1 billion range, over $1 billion, you might stick around with it, or you might just decide to retire to Bora Bora before it sinks under the greenhouse gas waves. But in the $300 to $500 billion range, you probably want to become a venture capitalist so you can take that lottery winning and do it again. And you can either end up as a general partner, which is a little challenging to do, or you can start as an associate, and you'll actually be the one who's filtering all of the deals. And the question is, what is life like for sort of a more junior VC associate? The rumor is that life is terrible. And the answer is, that's mostly true. But But as to why that is and whether or not that's always the case, I'm actually going to do something that most GPs don't do. And I'm going to ask a junior associate to answer that question. So Carlos, one, I would like you to tell the class if anything I've said is crazy or bullshit, which by the way is one of the key functions of a junior associate, is they can quietly pull you aside and say, actually, no one uses that programming language anymore, or your math was completely wrong, and you're very old and are out of touch, or you said something offensive, or you were in the wrong conference room and that wasn't even the right company you were talking to, that's not your deal. They can sort of call bullshit on you. And so Carlos, if I said anything that was untrue or misleading, please let the class know, and also tell them what it is like to be a junior associate.
Well, I made half the slide, so I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. So, you know, the way that I would sort of look at life as, I guess, like an analyst or associate is, you know, I started in VC after working as an equity research analyst. So I was an equity research analyst for a few years. You know, started as an analyst at a different fund, made it all the way to associate over there. And yeah, I mean, Bruce is right. Most of your work really is just, I guess the unsexy term for it is grunt work. I like to think of it as deal processing. You can tell them the truth
about the PowerPoint, Carlos. Just go ahead and tell them what I asked you to do and tell them how terrible I was about it. Because this is real.
No, well, we made some slides and then, you know,
no, you made a lot
I don't know
what
happened to them.
Yeah.
We made a lot of slides. I don't know what happened
not to them. Use them.
Yeah, because yeah. I was actually waiting for I was waiting for them to pop up. But yeah, you know, in all honesty, the way that I would look at sort of your life as an analyst or associate, which is probably if you guys you know, choose to go into VC at an early age, like kind of I did, is that the way to think about it is you're doing a lot of this grunt work and you're doing a lot of this deal processing because that's how you learn the ropes of the business. I remember when I was a equity research analyst, you know, my whole day was modeling financial modeling and just writing equity research reports, buy, sell, hold ratings. I was on a, you know, public equities fund. You know, the few times that I was allowed to make a call didn't really turn out that well. So there's also a bit of a gut check element to it. You know, early on in your career, you don't really know what's what yet. And I think the same goes for VC as well. So like, you know, I've been fortunate enough to work for funds that have generated exits, like my previous fund and Carmenta as well. Carmenta, for example, like 2 exits in the last 12 months, which is not that common in VC land, you know, unless you get the, you know, funds who have tons of portfolio companies. But, you know, I don't think like this early on in my career, I would be able to, you know, very definitively make the decision to pull the trigger on an investment, which is kind of why I lean on Kirk, Bruce's co-founder, and on Bruce to kind of like sanity check our work as well, right? But you know, yes, that is going to be your life as an analyst or associate. I would say like most of your time is really going to be spent poring over due diligence documents. I mean, you know, like we did a bunch of deals late last year. I can do that. You know, we're a very lean team at Carmenta, so I was doing, you know, all-nighters, like you know, doing back-to-back all-nighters, and you know, just doing revisions upon revisions upon revisions. But you know, that's how you learn. And you know, I'm sure Bruce had to do his fair share of that, and every VC who makes it the GP level probably had to do their fair share of that. But you know, I would look at it more as, yeah, that's how you learn the business, and it's not an easy business to learn. It's an apprenticeship model, and there's no other way than to do deals.
Yeah, and you know, I should listen to Carlos more often. He told me to put more money in DraftKings, and I said no. So that was obviously idiotic on my part. And then I have the temerity to say, "Where's my stock distribution, Carlos, on this draft?" This is how I spend my entire day. It is a lot of hard work. I'll end on a cheerful note. This has been a miserable year And you guys honestly are facing a very, very difficult road ahead. It's a challenging economic environment. This is a difficult time to learn. I'm sure that a lot of you are disturbed by what's happening in the United States, whatever side of the aisle you're on. You know, when I came up, it was the 1990s, and I think we worried about whether or not like you could still wear a flannel shirt in 1999. It was like the big, oh, Y2K. That was like our existential crisis. Now you actually have to worry about whether or not we're all going to be alive. So it can seem bleak, but here's the thing, you know, working as I did, you know, a lot of GPs will reminisce, and partly that's because they want to burnish their track record, and partly because they're going slightly senile and they can't remember how many times they've told you the same story. Is that they're proud of the work they've done. You know, I'm proud of the fact that I once was diligencing a deal in a synthetics plastics company. It was making plastics out of mushrooms outside of Albany, New York, while raising money in Singapore. That is not a great commute, okay? It's just not an A+ commute. It's a long series of flights. But it was fun, and I was happy I did it. And you will never have more fun. And almost everyone I talk to whose company, you know, worked reasonably well, either from a learning perspective or preferably from a learning and financial perspective. They look back on their sort of like mid-20s to early 30s, you know, or early 20s if you're going straight out and doing it, as the most rewarding part of their life and the most fun part of their life. Now, this, of course, leaves you with early midlife crises, like you end up buying weird sports cars, or in my case, a grand piano for no reason. But it's the most fun you'll ever have. I think it really is. And it's the most important work that you'll ever do, in part because you'll be so tired after it that you'll just never have the energy to do it again. But what you can do in that first 10 to 15 years is absolutely amazing. And you'll be so glad you did it. If you don't make a few of the sort of critical mistakes that we've discussed. And one of the reasons why I focus on this sort of hodgepodge set of things is one of the few things that VCs do see over and over again, even more than IPOs, is the same awful mistakes or the same awful misconceptions, some of which we voice on you. But if you can avoid those, which are frequently company killers, they're certainly happiness killers, then you can do great things. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But you'll give it a stab, and it can be a huge amount of fun while you're doing it. You're in one of the best places in the world to do it. And the other thing is, if you don't want to do it, there's absolutely no shame. I'm shocked, you know, I taught 2 classes in 2008 and 2010 at Stanford. And I was shocked at the degree of startup shaming that was going around, where there was nothing in life that you could do that would be nearly as valuable as a startup. And not just a startup, but one that you had started yourself or were employee like number 7 at, like anything above that. Once you got in the double digits, it was like worthless. And there was this whole miasma around it. You knew that things were really going off the rails when students from the B schools started showing up in the engineering part of campus, which I'm sure they had to Google Maps. But there is absolute pride to be found in basic research and development at governments, at higher educational institutions, at major corporations. There is huge value that you can unleash within large corporations, running a small or even a large team over time. If a startup is something you feel you are compelled to do, I think that you ought to, because it's the most fun that you're ever going to have. It's also the most misery you're ever going to have, but they happen at the same time, and one is slightly larger than the other. But if it's not for you, if you're not absolutely certain it's for you, you're going to walk out of Berkeley with a tremendous engineering degree. Go out and do something else with it. It doesn't even have to be engineering. You might end up wanting to go work for Goldman Sachs and design, you know, yet another quantitative algorithm. And by the way, each one is better than the last. And they do add value to society. There are 1,000 things that you can do. And one of the most important things you can do with startups is not be seduced into the idea that is the sole metric of your accomplishment in life. So wherever you choose to create value for yourself and for others, with your degrees in business or in engineering. And it helps to get both degrees. It really does. And it also helps to take some liberal arts classes, more than you would think, more than the dead minimum. And to know more than one language, which a lot of you already do. Go out, have a well-rounded education, and pick something that's meaningful to you. Do not be trapped into the mindset that this is the only thing that you can do with your life. Just as I was trapped originally in the mindset the only thing that I could do in my life was being an investment banker, or get continuing my engineering education, which I was terrible at and should never have thought about. Nor should you think that it's just startups or just Google. There are a million other options on the table, and they're all valid if they're valid for you. I don't have a lot of wisdom to share, but that's about it. It's an hour and a half of me, which is more than enough for most people. If there are any sort of burning questions that you would like me to answer with bracing honesty, or where you suspect that people have lied to you in the past, because I clearly don't care and we're in the middle of a pandemic, about what people think of me, I am happy to answer them honestly. And if you would just like to go and have a beer and think about, what's next on, your exam, then by all means, do it. All right, here's a question. This is how old I am. Let's see if I can do it. All right. Is there any way we could get your contact info for any questions along the way? This answers one of Carlos's last questions. What do junior associates do? Please direct your inquiries to Carlos, because there are two reasons for that. One, I am lazy. And two, like all GPs, the minute you email me, I will lose it. I have thousands of unread emails a month. Your best shot at getting a response, including from me, your best shot, ironically, is going through someone else. I'll just tell you the truth. So email Carlos. And by the way, it's actually very easy to figure out any VC's email convention. It's of course the same as anyone's email convention, which is firstname@domainname.com. And that applies for every venture capital firm that you know. And I'm sure I will get lots of angry emails from people I used to call friends about that. But it's true. Also equally true is they will get lost. The most important thing that you can do when doing your pitch is to have someone, you've obviously had some form of interaction with me, albeit Zoom mediated, is you have to find someone who already knows the VC or some organic way to do it, because otherwise we'll get lost in the inbox. Okay. Anyone else? Don't feel obliged. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Thomas and Summer to conclude. Oh, what would you say your best investment is so far? There are two. The logical answer is PayPal, because it allowed me to do everything else that I did, literally everything else, including leaving a job that I didn't want to be at, which was a litigator, which I didn't, I lasted like a year, and then Peter hired me. And he loves to point out that he was a litigator for 7 months, but I lasted like 13. So he was definitely that much smart. He is smarter than I am, but he was like 50% smarter than me on that front. The other sort of best investment, and it just depends on the day. I'm really proud of the work, and I know it's controversial, that Palantir does, and I was very, very early in it. But for sheer thrill power, nothing has given me the same thrill as SpaceX. I really believed in that company. And I had to, because the very first thing I did after doing that investment was had to explain to investors why the launch vehicle experienced what NASA called a, quote, unplanned energetic disassembly, which is known in English as an explosion. But I thought there was huge value in launch space. It turned out that there was. I thought Elon was an incredible entrepreneur, and I was lucky enough to go to the first successful launch of the Falcon 9. And there's just nothing cooler than space. And surprisingly, the rocket went up the first time. Normally they get delayed due to weather or some unanticipated complication. So my co-founder, my co-GP and I, who was also my college roommate, who is now the ambassador to Sweden, really, you're stuck with the same friends your whole life. Then we went to Disneyland, and what more perfect story is there than that? So what are the core points to hit when pitching a VC to save time and keep engagement interest? okay, why is what you're doing, why has no one else thought of this before? Have a principal reason for that. And how is it going to make them a lot of money in some way that is not wildly implausible? These are the two things that will get their interest. Once you've gotten their interest, that you can dig into your sort of particular this, your particular that. A lot of founders will immediately launch into, and this happens to all of us when you're in the thick of it. I've done it while on TV talking about my books. There's something that I have just been researching and I'm fascinated by it. And so that's what I want to talk about, but that's not why I've been invited on the show or whatever. Maybe this entire lecture has been an illustration of this phenomenon. Whatever you were working on in the lab or at your computer or whatever you're most proud of, you'll immediately want to dig into that at great length. The VC has no idea what you're talking about, none, nor should they, by the way, because otherwise you'd have no real technological advantage. So you should focus on the big picture so as not to lose them. You should tell them why it's not too crazy, but just crazy enough, and why it has a plausible chance of making money, even though that will not actually be the way that you're making money. And then once you've sort of satisfied them that you are addressing their serious concerns, which is how are you novel and how is this not just a waste of money, then you can get into the longer pitch. So that's what I'd suggest. And although you officially have 55 minutes to do this, 10 of which will be spent waiting for the VC to show up in the conference room, you actually have like 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to really attract their attention. If you don't get them in the first 2 minutes, the rest of it, their eyes are going to glaze over. They'll sit there so that you don't go and badmouth them at your university, or wherever. But that's it. You've got 2 minutes. And one thing VCs are genuinely good at, by the way, and sometimes you have a great idea, it's just not the right fit for them. They haven't raised a fund in a while. They're about to raise a fund. They don't have money right now. They just don't like this space or that space, or they have 40 million of these companies. Or you be starting a company that's competitive with one of their core holdings. Sometimes it's just not a fit. But one thing VCs are good at is getting to a no quickly because it's cognitively efficient. It is hard to get to a yes. That will take multiple cycles. Getting to a no, that happens fast. So you've got a 2-minute window to avoid getting the no out of them. How much research is usually done before deciding on investment? So just extending the same theme. To say no, no research. You have a reasonably good gut sense. This is probably your comparative advantage, is knowing a bad idea when it walks through the door. It might not even be a bad idea, it's just a bad idea for you at that time. And then to get to a yes for a first investment as opposed to a follow-on. For a first investment, it can be anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to weeks. The sweet spot is probably, 20 hours of an associate time, 5 hours of a GP time. Almost all of that time will have ended up asking the wrong questions because again, that won't be your business model and that won't be your terminal technology, but that's okay. What you really do is you get to know the team and you can ask them all sorts of weird questions. Every VC has a patented crazy question. I have all sorts of weird questions. For a long time, mine involve pets. You will be asked all sorts of strange questions. All VCs think that their question is the magic question. They're all wrong, I'm wrong, but it does allow them to assess how you roll with the punches and whether or not they're going to like working with you. And conversely, you can assess whether or not you're going to like working with them. Okay, what are some differences and considerations or things to watch out for when investing in a company outside of the US versus in the US? Okay, one is rule of law. There are a lot of countries where your equity ownership is not real. Where there are legal prohibitions on foreigners holding either a direct equity investment or controlling interest, or collectively a controlling interest. So that's something that I would look out for when investing overseas. Conversely, that will, of course, be a barrier to you attracting US venture capital, which you will want. Rule of law is also important because your technology can be expropriated in certain jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions are much worse than others, or you can be forced into a JV that you don't want. And some jurisdictions have much more onerous privacy regulations. And some jurisdictions just aren't ready for your idea because they're low middle income countries, or they're low income countries. Conversely, some countries are great for your idea because they are low income countries or low middle income countries. And probably the very unacceptable way that I put it is, emerging markets are great for VCs because they're like a time machine. You've actually seen what happens to companies that don't have Amazon in them, because you saw what happened in Amazon here. That's not a guarantee that they're going to work. Or even, and this isn't just emerging markets, this is markets where there are emerging sectors like Europe. Europe has a horribly backward financial sector. I mean, there are people in, there are a large number of consumers in Germany. And I was stunned by this. And this is right off the bat how I knew that I wanted to invest in German fintech. People will buy cars in cash and pay their utility bills in cash. This is a sign of a grossly underdeveloped financial system. So I invested in some German fintech companies. No, not Wirecard, other ones. This is again why Gap is important. And even in the U.S., right? If you're from basically any other country, you know that our mobility service in the United States is like 4 years out of date at best. There are 1,000 things that we could be doing here if only we had modern, mobility. We don't. So the time machine works in both directions. So there are opportunities, and of course there are pitfalls. One pitfall, by the way, is there's a huge amount of things in life that you just have to do in person, and growing a team is, and I'll probably, I'm showing my age here. Growing a team for me is one of them. You have to do weird things together, right? You have to do the all-nighters together. You all have to get food poisoning from the taco truck together. These are all strange bonding experiences. You have to go and see the same crazy VC together and walk out in the elevator and say, who was that? What was he talking about the entire time? And when you have a distributed team, or it's far from your family, or it's far from your customers, it's very hard to build that sort of core important nucleus. Okay, it seems like all your friends or roommates are people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, but not everyone has access to that kind of talent. Any advice on how to best position yourself to tap into that talent, how to make friends with great entrepreneurs? This is a good question, and not one I have a reassuring answer for. Okay, so obviously not all of my friends were people like Elon and Peter. A large number of them were. Part of that was because PayPal floated so many people that they were able to go out and experiment and do crazy things. And that gave a lot of license to a lot of us. And you only need one. So I would, make a wide acquaintance. And when you you can be mercenary about this, but I wouldn't. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I know that's easy for me to say, but there are some things in life that are meant to be. And in a certain sense, it's meant to be for you. You're at one of the finest universities and one of the finest engineering programs in the world. Someone in your class is going to start something great, probably more than one. If you have a large enough circle of friends, you'll eventually bump into them and your interests will overlap, and you'll connect. It's not that large an engineering school, especially in your sub-discipline. And you'll just bump into each other. And those are the kind of people who you want to be talking to, because people who really want to work at Lockheed Martin versus SpaceX, they're not going to want to talk to you in the first place because you're going to seem crazy, and vice versa. And in terms of making friends with great entrepreneurs, you're going to make friends with them before they're great entrepreneurs. When they're great entrepreneurs, they don't need new friends. They don't have time for new friends. You're going to make, and it's not even going to be authentic. They're always going to be skeptical. This is why the dirty secret is like, this is why a lot of people who start, who start successful companies or venture capitalists who have a good track record actually have the same circle of friends, much to the chagrin of their spouses or significant others. It's the same people, because those are the people they trust. Those are the people who are authentic. And you're going to make some of these friends as you go along at Berkeley. And if you feel like you haven't made them, that's okay. There are other things for you to do. And if you really feel like you need to make them, then go get a master's degree at a different school, and you'll make some more friends that way too. And again, a large part of it is luck dependent.
Awesome. It's almost 8. Thank you so much, Bruce and Carlos. Thank you everyone for coming, and we will end here.
Thank you, everyone. Be well. Stay safe.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Bruce.
So much.
Thank you.